is here for a reason. Everybody is here because they are blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many times in the Quran has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shown us that our lives, our creation is a miracle, is a blessing? Ibrahim alayhi salam did not have his first child until he was in his 80s. Zakaria alayhi salam was an old man. His wife was barren, but they were still blessed with the son in Yahya alayhi salam. Maryam alayhi salam had a pure, the most miraculous birth in our history of Isa alayhi salam. And the most blessed birth of our entire history in the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So how many times has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shown us in the Quran that your life, your time on this earth is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And so our job now is to live up to that blessing. And so our job is not to say, how is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help going to come? Or if the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to come. Look at the wording in the Quran. Mata Nasrullah. Look at the wording of the companions. When will the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come? It's not if. They knew it was going to come. They just wanted to know when. But my brothers and sisters, our job is not to figure out when it's going to come. Our job is not to figure out how it's going to come or the matter it's going to come. Our job is to play our role, to do our part in any way that we possibly can. Whether that is giving tonight, whether that is advocating, whether that is striving, whether that is standing long nights in tahajjud with your feet in pain because our brothers and sisters are in pain. So that's a small thing that we can do in order for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us a part of that great victory in the month of Ramadan. So my brothers and sisters, I don't want to take too much time because I was watching Ustad Sami Hamdi videos on the way here. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to maybe recreate another video, inshallah ta'ala. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free our brothers and sisters in Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help our brothers and sisters all over the globe. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us on this night and in this month to be generous and to give abundantly to all the causes of the Muslim globe and all the causes that are in Gaza that are helping. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that victory in the month of Ramadan. Allahumma ameen. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I just want to welcome Sheikh Ala Badr. You all know him, mashallah. He gives beautiful durus in this masjid. Always, Sheikh, we trapped you with this cord. Alhamdulillah, many of you all know Sheikh Ala Badr, his beautiful lectures that he gives here in this masjid, all the services that he does for the entire community. Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him for that. His topic is about how we as an ummah should be all connected to the cause of Palestine. Why is it important for the ummah? Why is the ummah concerned about the cause and the qadiyya of Palestine? So inshallah, he's going to connect that, how this is because of the ummah, and the focus of this ummah right now is that inshallah ta'ala to see a Palestine that is free, a Palestine that is liberated, inshallah. So can I get a takbir? Allahu Akbar.
Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa alayhi wa sahbihi wa man wala ba'd. I don't know why they call me Sheikh. I don't know whether it's because my hair is getting white or my body is getting big. I'm just like you. Wallahi, I'm not a Sheikh. And mashallah, Sheikh Juban is here. People that have spent their time, mashallah, studying Islam. And it's hard to go after Brother Akram because there's not much left to be said. Mashallah, la quwwata illa billah. But the thing about Al-Aqsa and Palestine in particular is that it is part of our aqeedah. This is not an optional extra that we do. This isn't like, I'm just going to perform the sunnah of, eating one date or 3 dates when it's time to break fast. And wallahi, this is critical. I personally, I'm going to speak about the Muslim Ummah for a second. On an individual level, I really struggle when I speak to people that feel like they're going over and above. to think about Palestine or to think about Al-Aqsa. They're like, it's out of their own goodwill to do that, but it's not a requirement. It's a requirement because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us so in the Quran. And the connection to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala announces to the Prophet ﷺ an entire surah in the early Makki period called Surah Al-Isra. The other name for the surah is Surah Bani Israel. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the experience that the Prophet ﷺ has with Isra and Mi'raj. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the whole land of Palestine being blessed. Because sometimes, again, I'm just going to address the Muslim Ummah. Let's write kind of our own FAQ document here. Is Palestine, why don't we just care about Al-Aqsa? Why don't we just negotiate a treaty where we say, okay, give us back Al-Aqsa, you take the rest of the land, let everyone go and pray there, let everyone take flights to Al-Aqsa from Egypt and Indonesia, and we'll call it good. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the whole land as blessed land. The whole land as Muslim land in Surah Al-Isra. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the start of the surah, ayah number 1 in Surah Al-Isra, سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed the entire land of Masjid Al-Aqsa. In Surah Al-Anbiya, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He speaks about Ishaq, and He speaks about Yaqub, and He speaks about Lut, and He speaks about all these messengers. Where were they? Al-Ard allati barakna hawla. The whole land of Palestine. In fact, the whole land of what we call today Bilad al-Sham. To give you a geographical Google Earth GPS reference, it speaks about, if you look on the map today, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, all of that is enclosed in the Al-Ard allati barakna hawla, the land that the Prophet, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made blessed for all mankind. This land, my brothers and sisters, is meant to be run and justice applied within from the Ummah of Islam. When the Ummah of Islam is just in of itself and is strong, it gets that privilege. When the Ummah of Islam is disunited and weak and fights each other and further away from the deen, it loses that privilege. That's the simple formula. That's the simple formula. That's it. There's no other way to think, oh, they have this, we have that. Oh, they have this support, we have this. Oh, no. This is the balance of what's at hand. When the Qibla of the Muslims was changed, so roughly when the Prophet ﷺ went and he made his hijrah, we all should know the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. He made hijrah from Mecca to Medina. The Prophet ﷺ prayed for a year and a half, plus or minus a few months, towards Jerusalem, towards the Masjid Al-Aqsa. So in Medina, he was standing north. His Qibla was north. For people that have been to Medina, that have performed Umrah, that have been to a masjid called Masjid Al-Qiblatayn, you will see the Qiblas in that masjid at extreme opposite of each other. One is that way, one is this way. To show you where the Prophet ﷺ used to pray before it changed. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes the ruling at the very start of the second juz of the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah. So if you're following Taraweeh, the Imam probably read it yesterday. The first ayah of the second juz of the Quran speaks about the change of the Qibla. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this change. He makes this change, not a difference in the Muslims believing between kufr and Islam. He makes it a difference between nifaq and Islam. Muslims that don't care actually don't fall in the category of kufr wal-'iyadu billah, they fall in the category of munafiq. Because some people in this change, they said, what is this religion? He keeps changing his mind, one way it's this way, one way it's that way. The Yahudis of Medina said, oh, at first he was following the right Qibla, our Qibla, now he changed, now he's wrong. We thought he'd be doing the things that we do. Everyone had an opinion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, سَيَقُولُ السُّفَهَاءُ مِنَ النَّاسِ, the fools amongst people will ask you, why did you change your Qibla? It doesn't mean we lost the love that we have for Masjid Al-Aqsa. First reason is this is the place of Isra. This is the place that the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to love, and love it as much as the Haram in Mecca. These are both Haram in Islam. What's the second reason? Abu Dharr al-Ghafari radiallahu anhu, one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, Ya Rasulullah, ayyu masjid wudi'a awwal. Look at the beautiful questions of the companions. The companions radiallahu anhum, they'd ask the Prophet ﷺ questions about how do you pray, how much zakat do you give, but they'd also ask him questions that are super interesting. So Abu Dharr al-Ghifari asked the Prophet ﷺ, he says, which masjid was built first for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the Prophet ﷺ says, Al-Masjid al-Haram, the Masjid in Mecca. And then Abu Dharr al-Ghifari goes on and he says, what was the second? And he says, Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. And then he says, Kam baynahuma, how much is in between? He says, Arba'un, more than likely 40 years. By most tafsir of the scholars of hadith, they say the time difference between the construction of Al-Masjid al-Haram and Al-Masjid al-Aqsa is 40 years. So it's the second most important masjid in Islam after the construction of this other masjid. The story now changes when we start to ask ourselves, okay, you've convinced me that this is important for us and this is something that we must believe in. But is there anything more important? As it relates to that land, is there something more important? And the answer is yes, there is. And what's more important than the land itself? What's more important than the masjid itself? Who can tell me? Raise your hand. Yell out the answer. Huh? Life, the people. What's even more important than Al-Aqsa and the land of Palestine is the people. The people on the land. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he says, لَزَوَالُ الدُّنْيَا, that the whole dunya may be destroyed is easier than on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than a single breathing life dying in vain. لَزَوَالُ الدُّنْيا, the whole dunya in one kaffa does not count to a single Muslim's life dying innocently. And when people say, well, why did they leave their land? Why did this happen? Again, this is the ignorant Muslim. I'm not even going to talk about the non-Muslim. Oh, the ignorant. Why did they leave? Why did they do this? Why did they do that? The Prophet ﷺ, without recounting the history, has a beautiful hadith. And he says, there will always be a ta'ifa, a group of my ummah. عَلَى الْحَقِّ ظَاهِرِينَ. What does that mean? Means they will be holding on to the truth no matter how hard it can be. Look at them in Gaza now. The first genocide that you see in the 21st century transmitted live on television. This isn't the Holocaust. This isn't Rwanda. This isn't Bosnia. This isn't Yugoslavia and World War. No. This is 2024 with CNN, satellite television, YouTube, everything being broadcast live. And we now see this genocide to these innocent brothers and sisters that we have living in the land of Palestine. And the Prophet ﷺ goes on to, in this hadith, look at the beautiful hadith. He doesn't just say they're holding on to the truth. He says, لا يضرهم من خذلهم. لا يضرهم من خذلهم. Anyone that lets them down doesn't matter. Meaning what? Meaning other Muslims, who else could let them down? Because the enemy doesn't let you down. The enemy is the enemy. The ones that let you down are your friends and allies. Those are the ones that let you down. So the Prophet ﷺ says, when they're allies and friends and people they're expected to support, even if they let them down, Allah will give them nusra. Meaning, if we don't support them, my brothers and sisters, we are from the ones that let them down. So our job is to help and support in every way we can. And how do we help and support? In Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ كُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ عَلَى شَاكِلَتِهِ فَرَبُّكُمْ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنْ هُوَ أَهْدَى سَبِيلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Isra, every one of you, this is the beauty of Islam, the individuality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you are Muslims and you are individual. What does individual mean? You have your own characteristics. You have your own quirks and features. Each one of us does. This is the nature of a human being. What someone is very good at, someone else is not good at. What someone else is very good at, the other person is not good at. Someone may be more emotional. Someone may be more controlled. Someone is more analytical. Someone is this. Someone is that. But why is the ummah this way? To complete each other. Because when we work together, we achieve results. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ كُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ. Let every one of you work according to their shakila, according to their characteristics, according to what they bring to the table. We don't all have to bring the same thing to the table. فَرَبُّكُمْ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنْ هُوَ أَهْدَى سَبِيلًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows whoever is the most guided. Let this be a time, my brothers and sisters, when we do whatever small contributions we can for the nusra of these brothers and sisters in Palestine. أقول قولي هذا وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله.
Takbir. Allah. Ask everyone if you could just move a little bit up. I know. Yeah. It's going to get more filled up as, inshallah, we move to the next segment of our program. It's working, right? You can all hear me? Takbir. Allahu Akbar. Allah, for that beautiful, touching reminder. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those people when they hear these verses, the Quran, these reminders, and we bring it into full practice. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Now, inshallah ta'ala, now we're going to move into the next segment of our program. I know all of you probably have seen, mashallah, his wonderful takes on Islam, politics, geopolitics, the impact of how the current genocide that is happening to our brothers and sisters in Gaza, how is that impacting the global geopolitics? And mashallah, he's been on a not only a country tour, but a world tour, but I think he's mashallah traveled very well in the US. Every weekend, I see him in like 3 different cities. Ustad Sami, mashallah ta'ala. So we're very fortunate to have him here in our community to, inshallah, inspire us. And hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, what I really loved about, I was there at the mass convention in Chicago this year. I don't know, did any of you guys go there? You were there? And his message was a message of hope, a message of resilience, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this ummah a wake-up call for us to, inshallah, use this as a means to come back to Allah, that inshallah victory is near, the ummah inshallah ta'ala is strong. That type of message, in a moment where you think that it's just defeat, it's struggle, it's challenges, there's no way out, I found that very resounding and very impactful to me as a person, listening to him. And a lot of youngsters, a lot of people all over the world have been inspired by that message. So alhamdulillah, I'm very honored to have our dear brother Sami Hamdi, inshallah, here with us in Seattle. And we're all here for a noble cause to support, inshallah ta'ala, the humanitarian side, helping our brothers, the advocacy side. Many of you have been constantly been doing this. Inshallah, we won't stop until we see a free Palestine, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. فليتفضل مشكورا مأجورا بإذن الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Jazakumullah alf khair for having me. Jazakallah khair for the organizers for having me as well. First of all, just to push back slightly on the introduction, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Man kana yuridu al-izzata falillahi al-izzatu jami'a. Those who seek glory, let them know all glory belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Muhammad Asad in his book Road to Mecca, which I read at 18 years of age and completely transformed my perspective on how deen and politics come together, or the deen and life come together. Muhammad Asad, for those who don't know, was born an Austrian Jew called Leopold Weiss. He becomes a journalist and he begins to cover the Middle East, and he goes across the Middle East and he dissects the politics and socio-political environment of different Muslim societies. In Libya, where they are fighting the Italian colonization, the relationship between the Ottoman Sultan and the Muslims who are trying to liberate their own lands while at the same time recognizing the authority of the Sultan, exposing some of the difficulties in navigating those relationships. He goes to Saudi Arabia at the time in which Sharif Hussein has been betrayed by the British and Abdulaziz Al Saud has taken advantage and established his kingdom, to go into Afghanistan. And then he eventually becomes Pakistan's representative at the United Nations and is one of the 6 sent by King Faisal of Saudi Arabia to help write Pakistan's constitution. An extraordinary individual. One of the beauties about reverts sometimes, in my opinion, is that reverts tend to see a beauty in Islam that those born into Islam often take for granted. Which is why there is an interesting passage in his book Road to Mecca where he's on a boat and he's going towards Umrah and he meets these Yemenis, and these Yemenis don't have much in their pocket at all. When they ask why is there a white guy sitting on the boat with them going towards Umrah, they ask about him. They want to know where he came from. So he tells them, I was born an Austrian Jew, I became a Muslim, or the like. So these Yemenis, they stop mid-conversation and they go and they huddle in a corner. And then they come back to him and they present a small sum of money, which they've all gathered, collected together. They said they want to give it to him. And he feels embarrassed. He says to them, no, please, I don't need this. He says, no. And they say to him, no, take it. For wallahi, somebody who saw the beauty of Islam and entered it willingly loves Islam more than the one who was born into it. For you had to give up a previous life to enter Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We never had to make such a decision. Allah blessed us from the beginning. Muhammad in his book Road to Mecca, amongst his observations is that it's not Muslims that make Islam great, it's Islam that makes Muslims great. It's not Muslims that make Allah great, it's Allah that makes Muslims great. The point being is that as long as a Muslim stands for justice and says what is right, Allah will elevate them. But if that same person tomorrow chooses to stand with injustice and say that which promotes injustice, Allah will humiliate them just as quickly as He elevated them. I bear witness that that is true, and I acknowledge that all glory belongs to Allah, and I acknowledge that the words that people have been resonating with are not the words of Sami al-Hamdi, but more the words of justice of Palestine, that Palestine embodies. And if I were to say words contrary to that, I would be humiliated in this ummah and discarded just as quickly as I have been elevated. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sometimes when you're going around to these different cities, for context, I landed in New York a couple of weeks ago, went straight to Raleigh, then California. From California, I went to Dallas, from Dallas to Miami. From Miami, I went back to New York, and then from New York, I went to Phoenix. Phoenix went to Denver. Denver, I arrived here in Seattle. And tomorrow, 6 a.m., inshallah, I go to New Jersey, inshallah. And I'm a fan of New Jersey. When I went there, they said to me, why do you keep calling it New Jersey? No one calls it that here. And I said to them, I grew up with American movies, and they called it New Jersey. And he said, but that was the movies. I don't know, why do you want to ruin my imagination for? I don't understand, Yani. You just go with me on this. One of the things that you realize is that I read a comment once on one of the videos. They said, Sami, Jazakallah khair, but bro, we need new content. And I sat there for a while thinking to myself, how do you do new content in this? And it got me thinking, because in the beginning you start thinking, how can you say it differently? How can you say it in a way? And it starts breaking your heart a little bit, in that to get people to talk about justice, Palestine, to break it down, say them, please, ya ibadallah, move. Suddenly the justice alone is not what's sufficient to move people. Suddenly the issue alone is not what's enough to move people. Suddenly I have to market it in a different way and come up with new marketing strategies to get people to hear the message of justice. وَإِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. In fairness, I responded with a rather controversial statement that got me in a slight trouble. I said to them, Ya ibadallah, Quran has been the same for 1400 years. No one asked for a new Quran, subhanAllah. The point being is not that my words are Quran. The point being is the principle of a message can be relevant and the same at every period of time. And in this particular case, the reason the message is the same is because there is a genocide unfolding before us. There's an ethnic cleansing unfolding before us. It's being live streamed right before us. And that's why pushing back against that requires a perseverance, that requires a reminder of the message. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, فَذَكِّرْ إِن نَفَعَتِ الذِّكْرَى. Remember, for remembrance benefits you. And the reason why I've come here to Seattle and accepted the very generous invitation is because remembrance here will benefit you, especially at a time in which many Muslims are beginning to feel the fatigue. They're beginning to feel tired. They're beginning to ask themselves, I'm doing all these things. I'm doing all these things that Sami kept going about on YouTube. And they kept going all this, but it's not working. I'm seeing more people die. I'm seeing the genocide continue. I'm seeing more killing. I'm seeing more bombings. I'm seeing the world with its hypocrisy in full view. I cannot see where this victory has come. These people, zulzilu, they have been shaken in their hearts. حَتَّى يَقُولَ رَسُولَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ مَتَى نَصْرُ اللَّهِ. They have been shaken like the companions before, to such an extent where they are now looking at the Prophet ﷺ and saying to him, Ya Rasulullah, when is this victory coming? You're telling us to keep moving. When is this victory coming? You're telling us to keep moving. We went with you in Badr, but we lost in Uhud, an existential crisis in Khandaq, and then we signed Hudaybiyah, which Umar ibn Khattab considered to be a humiliating treaty. We've gone through all of these periods with you, one by one, all of these different events. When is this victory that you promised us? When is it going to come? And the reality is that many of you might be feeling the same. The reason why I reference the Sahaba here is to demonstrate it's not necessarily a sign of a weak iman, rather it is a sign of the progression of pushing for justice. And the interesting fact is that that statement of when is the victory coming was said by the Sahaba just before the victory came. So if that is how you are feeling, then rather than look at it as a weak iman, look at it as that we are getting closer and closer so long as we keep going. I think sometimes it's better to start with my forte, which is the political analysis. The idea being that if we start with something that I'm more comfortable with, then it will make it easier with the stuff I'm less comfortable with. As it stands, Biden and Netanyahu are drawing up a plan to attack Rafah, to take the last aspect. And the reality is that it's a logical move. And I'll explain why I think it's a logical move. Put yourself in, this is going to be very hard to say and very hard to do, but put yourself in Netanyahu's position. Wa'iyadu billah. You have entered northern Gaza. Then you entered Gaza City. Then you entered Khan Yunis. And all that's left is Rafah. Why would you pull back now? You have a golden opportunity to annex all of Gaza, to take it and add it to the Israelis. Not only that, there are thousands and thousands of Israelis protesting in Tel Aviv. But what are they protesting about? They're not protesting the genocide. They're not protesting the ethnic cleansing. They're protesting that Netanyahu promised them security, and under his watch, October 7th happened. So they want Netanyahu to pay a price for compromising the security of the settlements of the land that they've taken for the Palestinians and on which they live on. Netanyahu promised them that though they've taken that land away from the Palestinians, he promised he would never allow Palestinians to make any serious attempt to take that land back. He promised them that they would be secure on Palestinian land. And Netanyahu broke that promise, and he must pay the price. He has to resign because he put Israel under threat and he broke that security. Netanyahu believes that given that the Israelis believe or are angry with him at compromising that security, he needs to give them a gift. He needs to give Israelis a gift that will make them forgive him for bringing about this security breach. And that gift is Gaza. That gift is more land. That gift is to say, I expanded the borders. I took more land from the Palestinians. This is my qurbani. This is my hadiyah to you. And they will say to him, you know what, Bibi? Bibi's his nickname. You know what, Bibi? It's true that it was horrible what you did in terms of allowing the security breach. But we forgive you for letting us set up more settlements and more houses. And more. We like the land. And he says the Jewish equivalent of Barakallahu Fik. Netanyahu believes that given now he's so close to Rafah, this is a golden opportunity. Because despite being on the border with Rafah, he looks around the region waiting for some sort of backlash, but finds none. He finds that the views expressed by the speaker are the speaker's own and do not reflect those of the organization or anybody who invited me or those who brought me here or this building or this masjid or those sitting next to me. My opinions are my own. They're Sami's own. They didn't ask me what I would say. I didn't tell them what I would say. And wallahi, that is the solemn truth. Netanyahu looks around him and he sees that in a certain country, they are more focused on concerts, raves, WWE Championship, Shakira concerts, and inviting Iggy Azalea for another concert. That's very important because it's the economic future of that country. It is vision something. That's fundamental. That can't be compromised. And part of that vision is to use the Israelis to win over the White House, because then they can get the White House and lobby it for support. Because according to the documentary, this new country is supposed to build new cities that look like Miami, not Shanghai, not Moscow. It's not supposed to look like BRICS. I don't really want to be part of BRICS. I'm just part of BRICS because Biden rejected me. I want, and the Israelis, given that my neighboring countries, when they normalize with the Israelis, they got benefits, why can't I normalize with benefits? This is a very serious economic project. I will not compromise for Gaza. Netanyahu looks and he says, very good. He looks at the other Muslim country and they say there's no going back on the Abraham Accords. There's no going back on the Abraham Accords. And the only threat that they can really muster is a threat that they put today. I was reading earlier that so-and-so country, because I know some people get a bit uncomfortable, so-and-so country has said that if you enter Rafah, if you don't allow aid to the Palestinians, not if you don't enter Rafah. I take that back. That's not what they said. Hashahum. They would never say something like that. If you do not allow aid to the Palestinians, we will stop the land bridge that we have built for you to bypass the blockade imposed by the Houthis. So what you've done so far is not enough for us to stop the land bridge. But if you don't allow aid, because the PR aspect is getting really bad because Muslims are increasingly talking about our role in this land bridge, we will stop this land bridge if you don't allow aid in and give us something that we can market through the media to say to the Muslims, at least we're doing something, even if we're not reversing ties with the Israelis. If you're Netanyahu, do this. This is part of political analysis. If you're Netanyahu, is there pressure coming from your neighboring countries to stop the genocide? No. Okay, so why should I stop? Netanyahu's problem is not actually coming from his neighbors in the Muslim lands. Netanyahu's problems are coming from his ally Biden in Washington. Because Biden has a problem. Biden's problem is not the genocide or the ethnic cleansing itself, but rather it's the impact of the genocide and ethnic cleansing on his political situation here in America. Biden, and put yourselves in the position of Biden again. I know it's hard, but I'll tell you just a very quick story. When I fell into the political risk industry by accident. I needed a job. I got married at 20 years of age. You know, Selma was on the way. I didn't want to do law. I was at home, my parents. So I need a job badly. Alhamdulillah, I was working, making decent money here and there, but I thought I need a job, political risk. When I fell into political risk, I didn't know what the job was, but eventually I did the 2 interviews not knowing what the job was because the interview questions were, tell us about Middle East. Okay? It was the Arab Spring at the time. Second interview, tell us about Saudi, Qatar, and UAE. Okay, then they gave me a really lovely salary, you know, top end of the graduate scheme. So I said, I don't know what this job is, but if they tell me jumping up and down 50 times, I'll do it for that kind of salary. Turns out my job was basically companies would come, they would say, we have investments in these countries and we're worried about the political changes and how it will affect our investments. So we just want analysis of what's happening politically so we can adjust accordingly. If our partner is going to get arrested within 2 weeks because there's a change in politics, we'll ditch our partner and try and find a partner who's going to go up in the new circles. So tell us who's winning, who's who, how do we tell who's winning, that kind. It was a great job. And I did well in my first few months until Sisi in Egypt had done his coup. When he did his coup, I was heartbroken. Not necessarily because of Egypt, even though I sympathized with them, but because I knew Tunis was next. I knew that those Egyptians, may Allah forgive them, I knew that they ruined it for everybody. So I knew Tunis was coming next. On the second day after the coup, we were supposed to go meet with a hedge fund that runs $26 billion investment. And my partners, the partners in the company, they said, Sammy, we're going to go meet them and you're going to go present to them. And I was very excited. It's good for an analyst to talk in front of these companies. It shows you're being elevated. So the company said to me bluntly, they said, listen, we couldn't care less who rules, whether it's Morsi, Allah Yarahmu, whether it's Sisi, whether it's whoever. But just the upheaval is really affecting our business. Is this where it ends now? Is this finally like the last, that's it? We just have, and in my heartbreak, I looked them in the eye and I said to them, 6 months, Sisi's gone. And they said, what? 6 months, he's gone. And I gave some stuff about the army won't tolerate the reputational damage and whatever. I knew that I was perhaps hoping more than I thought was going to happen. There was a former British ambassador who was with me in the meeting. He was an advisor to the firm I was working with. When we left the room, he interrupted me midway through and told the clients that maybe Sisi will stay for a long time because armies tend to rule. When we left the room, he told me something interesting. He said to me, Sammy, I'll give you a piece of advice. If you want to succeed in this industry, remember, we tell people what we think will happen, not what we want to happen. Don't do that again. I'm asking you to apply this here. Put yourself in the position of Biden. Don't imagine Biden how you want him to be. Imagine him how he is. If you're sitting in the White House, God forbid, if you're sitting in the White House and Rashida Tlaib walks in and says, the Muslims are going to punish you, the Muslims are going to punish you, they're saying they're going to punish you in the elections because of the genocide. But you've just got off the phone with one of the leaders in the region who's just told you that under no circumstance will we reverse the Abraham Accords. And you spoke to his main ally who said to him, Gaza what? No, I've got WWE. Can you please help me bring John Cena and the Undertaker, please? So Biden will tell Rashida, this is legitimate. He will say, you're telling me Muslims are angry, but the nations aren't angry with me. I just spoke to them on the phone. In fact, one of them is telling me that I'm ready to normalize ties in exchange for a pathway to a Palestinian state. The same tactic we used in Oslo when the Intifada threatened to ruin everything. We offered them a pathway to a Palestinian state, which meant we never needed to give them one. We only promised to consider a pathway. They're telling me that normalization is still possible, that this genocide we're committing is not a red line. She says, okay, that may be those nations, but Muslims in America itself. And he says to her, what are you talking about? Look at this Politico article. A day after the uncommitted vote in Michigan, Muslim leaders in Washington are telling me that this uncommitted doesn't mean we're going to abandon you. It just means, yes, Biden, please sit with us. Please sit down and we want to talk to you. So, Rashida, I know you're telling me Muslims are going to punish me, but given they still want to talk to me even after 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, Netanyahu only has Rafah left. Only Rafah. It's only Rafah. What are we today? We are March. I will still have April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November to win back those Muslim votes. A few inshallahs here and there. I still have 8 months. Netanyahu, how long do you need for Rafah? He says, I can take it maybe in 1 month, 2 months. 2 months. 6 months left to win back the Muslim vote. And the other side is Donald Trump. That's not a big ask. It's not difficult for me to win back the... That's Biden's assessment. So Biden says to Netanyahu, yeah, Netanyahu, I'm not under pressure to stop you on Rafah, but I'm worried about the PR and how long your campaign is going to take. It can't take so long that I don't have enough time to win back the Muslims by throwing them a few bones. You need to do it quickly, and you need to do it in a way where I can say to the Muslims that I'm at least trying to do something and that I empathize with them. So we need a humanitarian plan. The reason that's significant is because it ties into this port that they're building in Gaza that you've all read about. The reason they're building the port, Jerusalem Post reported today that that isn't actually Biden's idea. That's Netanyahu's idea. It's Netanyahu's concession to Biden. Biden, I have a plan. You're worried about the PR aspect, that American public opinion is changing and that Muslims are voting uncommitted, and that in Michigan 100,000 people voted uncommitted. That's 100,000 people who know what primaries are, because I've been to a few states, and when you tell them when their primary is, they have no idea. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. The point is that Netanyahu is saying to Biden, I can offer you something where you can tell the world that you are the one delivering the aid. Biden might say, why don't you just let the trucks in through Rafah? He says, no. That's actual aid. I want you to have the PR of giving aid without actually giving aid. If you notice 5 months ago, for those who've seen the video, there's a member of the Israeli parliament in the Knesset where she says that we will never be able to defeat the Palestinians unless we dismantle UNRWA, the UN relief agency, because they keep giving that aid. This port is supposed to be built so that the Americans can say, we don't need UNRWA. We don't need it now because we've built a port. There's 1,000 US personnel and we are delivering that aid. UNRWA, Jazakum, they don't say Jazakum, but thank you very much. And you don't need the funding anymore. All these allies. And the reason, think about it. The idea of the port came about after the EU went back to funding UNRWA. After the UK went back to funding UNRWA. After Norway tripled its funding for UNRWA, after Canada, Canada turned around and said there's not enough evidence, we're going to return UNRWA. This made the Israelis and Biden panic. Hang on. We're so close to annexing Gaza. We're so close to taking it. And now suddenly we're losing the narrative battle. What can we do to stop the aid coming back? Netanyahu says, I got an idea. Instead of letting UNRWA do it, why don't you do it? Because we saw when you did the airdrop, you killed 5 Gazans. That's the aid we like to see. The point that I'm saying here is Biden doesn't see any incentive to call for a ceasefire at the moment because he believes there's still hope to win back the Muslim vote. I remember in one of the states, there was an imam next to me. We sort of differed, but very diplomatically. He said to me, Sami, even when we talk about Biden, we should always leave the door open to communicate with Biden, because he said, wa'iyadu billah, and I think the Prophet is innocent of this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never used to cut communications with people. Now, sometimes I feel like Muhammad Asad has a theory, and I think it might be true. He says, Dajjal is not a human being. Dajjal is not an actual being. Dajjal is a perspective that the world starts to look at things. That, for example, in Islam, we see the spiritual, but we don't see the dunya. We relegate it to ibadah in the masajid, not ibadah in the world. That for us, ibadah is only tahajjud. Ibadah is not what we do in our daily lives when we go out and speak about Palestine or speak about whatnot. That's a Dajjalic way of looking at Islam, the secularization of Islam. When the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was broken between the Muslims and Quraysh, when the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was broken, where the Democrats promised to protect you from Trump, when the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was broken, Biden sent his campaign. Abu Sufyan went to Medina looking for any masjid that would receive him. Biden's manager went to Michigan to find any, Abu Sufyan went to Medina to find any Muslim leader who might sit with him and reassure him that he can get the Muslim vote back. When Abu Sufyan went to Amr ibn al-As, Amr ibn al-As said to him, I can't help you, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if he said, I'm sorry, Pop. He said, I can't help you. Khalid ibn Walid, Ya Khalid, Ya Khalid, Ya Khalid, I can't help you. He went to Bilal ibn Rabah, look how the tables have turned. Bilal, who they used to put on the floor and they put the rock on him and they used to torture him and treat him as the leader of Quraysh is going to Bilal ibn Rabah and said to him, Yeah, Bilal, please. How Allah elevates in dignity, subhanAllah. Bilal ibn Rabah said, I can't help you. They didn't say, Wallah, Rasulullah says, don't cut the communication. He said, I can't help you. Rasulullah, please meet with me. Please meet me. Rasulullah refused to meet with him. I told him, why are you like a Dajjal when you read the seerah? You read it with one eye and not the other. Biden, because he believes, because he's heard from a select minority group of Muslim leaders that Muslims don't want to abandon Biden, they just want to sit down and listen to him. Biden says, Khalas, if that is the case after 30,000 killed, but I'm on the border with Rafah, what's 10,000 more? But we take Rafah, we give it to the Israelis, and I give them a Palestinian state that consists of the West Bank. And the Imams will say, Alhamdulillah, this is a start. Rashid Tlaib will tell the Muslims are really angry. He tells them, Rashida, get out of my office. I've got a fatwa that makes it haram for you to talk to me about Gaza. I have a fatwa from the land of the holy mosques where Rashida, you should be making dua only for Gaza. You should not talk about it because it's a fitna. It's a fitna that will lead you, Rashida, to turn against your leaders. And you should obey the leaders and the scholars. I am your leader here in America. And in that Muslim country, that's the leader over there. You should not talk about it. Sam'an wa ta'a. For those of you who think, Sami, why have you brought this in like this? It's because there was a statement by Jared Kushner, which was very interesting. Jared Kushner gave Trump's son-in-law, he gave a keynote speech at the Davos in the Desert Forum in an Arab country where there are two holy sites. And in that keynote speech, this is 4 days into the genocide, 4 days into the genocide. In the keynote speech, he says that the Palestinians want to ruin normalization between the Muslim world and between Israel, and they are going to fail because I've heard here that people are still enthusiastic about normalization of ties. And Jared Kushner, when he came out to America, he said something very interesting. He said that I felt more safe in the land of the two holy mosques than I did here on the campuses in America, meaning when he went to the land of the two holy mosques, he wasn't brought up on the genocide. No one put him under pressure for it. No one told him, why are you supporting it? Why are you backing it? What are you doing? This, that. We're going to end normalization. No one told him that. He felt safe. Malish, don't worry. Genocide is not a red line. But when he came to American campuses, he heard a roar. Jared Kushner heard Americans angry with the genocide. Americans saying they were going to punish the political establishment for their support of genocide. Americans saying that normalization is not something that spreads peace, it's something that spreads injustice. Ordinary Americans coming out and turning around and saying that we no longer support Zionism. A poll emerged in the US saying that under 35s, an overwhelming majority are pro-Palestine, they are no longer Zionists. Kamala Harris is standing for Zionism, her daughter is raising money for Palestine. We are seeing Jews in the Congress doing a sit-in demanding justice for Palestine. You've all been to the protests. How many non-Muslims have you seen? Jared Kushner was worried that the non-Muslim is louder than most Muslim countries with regards to what's happening in Palestine, or louder at least than the Muslim rulers, because the people are still being very loud. I saw in Egypt a bunch of journalists, they came out, they said, Palestine, please forgive us, we're also colonized in our own country. The reason I start with this idea of Netanyahu and Biden and why they don't see a need to call for a ceasefire, it's not to say that your efforts haven't had any impact. It's that they don't realize the extent to which you've had an impact. And this is where I go into the final part of what I want to present. When Biden heard that Muslims might abandon him or Muslims might punish him, Biden didn't believe wholeheartedly that they wouldn't. Biden wanted to test it. So Biden changed the order of the primaries in the elections. He moved 2 states early in the primary route. He moved forward South Carolina and Michigan Sharif. Dallas will be upset. They said, you gave us that title, now give it to Michigan. I'm like, for now, we will do نغازل Michigan شوية. Who can tell me why he brought South Carolina forward? We know Michigan, but why South Carolina? African American vote. Biden was concerned that Muslims might impact the African American vote. When he went to South Carolina, he realized that we Muslims were very slow to reach out to our African American brothers and sisters. Very slow to go out to the pastors. That we Muslims perhaps manifested a twisted concept of da'wah. Where I was coming out from Manchester once for an event, and there was a brother with me, Zaid from El Buruj Press. We were talking about the ideas of da'wah and going out and speaking out to the world. And he said to me, Sembi, you know something very interesting. So I said to him, I was complaining. I said that there are many Muslims say, I want to make hijrah to UAE or to Saudi or to these places. And I said, subhanAllah, why is it that the pinnacle of a Muslim life for the Muslim in the West is that he spends every single day and night in the masjid? Whereas Sahaba, when you read their stories, they are in the masjid in the night, and in the day they are out, spreading Islam as far as they can. And he said to me, Sami, did you know an interesting observation? Only a minority of Sahaba are buried in Medina. Majority are buried outside of Medina, because they interpreted the message of the Prophet ﷺ as going out to the world, going out to the front lines to spread the deen. They didn't envisage the pinnacle of life as being something of comfort. They envisaged it as struggle on the front line. The reason why I say this is that when we talk about talking to American society, what's changed American public opinion is the ummah that responded to the Palestinian cause. When the Palestinians, Mu'tazza, Zayza, Palestinian, Hind al-Khudari, and all these others were putting out their videos, they were saying, share our content, don't let them silence us. So you were sharing it and amplifying it on the algorithm. When you amplified it on social media, the algorithm got very giddy. The algorithm was like, oh my goodness, yesterday Kanye West was the most trending topic. Now it's Palestine. What is Palestine? We don't care. Just put it on everybody's feed because billions of people are sharing it. If billions of people are sharing it, then everybody needs to see it. And so it ended up on the feed of Megan Rice. Megan Rice wants to understand why these Palestinians who Muslims might view as weak, how are they so strong that despite being bombarded, they continue to hold and resist, and they continue to celebrate La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. I saw a picture 2 days ago of a tent in Rafah. Do you know what's written on it? هذا من فضل ربي. This is from the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to show you what the Palestinians are like. She says, I want to understand who these Palestinians are. The Muslims who say the ummah is weak, the ones I meet in America, they might be weak, but I've just met strong Muslims. I'm seeing them on my phone. I want to understand who they are. She does a page of Quran live on TikTok every day. 2 weeks later, she appears on her live with a hijab and says, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. I tell you, Ya ibadallah, do you think she joined the weak ummah? What made her, do you think she said, I'm going to join a weak ummah and I'm going to change my whole life for a weak ummah? No. She did it for a strong ummah because she recognized a strength that some of us don't recognize. A girl in LA does a video saying, I grew up in a Zionist environment, never seeing any Palestinian content, but now as a result of algorithm, as a result of TikTok, hafadahullah wa ra'aha wa rafa'a maqama, as a result of TikTok, may Allah preserve it for us. And just say Ameen, unless you want to be limited to New York Times, unless you want New York Times or CNN to be your source of news. Yeah, unless you want to be blind. If you want to be blind, khalas, that's your business. But as a result of TikTok, hafadahullah wa ra'aha, and Instagram, and Meta, and may Allah guide those who created them, inshallah, to the deen, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. May Allah guide them to this deen. In any case, for those who say, how can you say it about tech companies? I met some brothers who are working in those tech companies, and they told me phenomenal stories about their lobbying. They managed to get Zionists removed from monitoring bodies that have been getting a lot of the pages banned and shadow banned. It's true that some accounts are shadow banned, but Palestine is still dominant on social media. Why? These brothers are working actively to make sure Zionists don't have a role, and they are succeeding in it. There's always change to be made in different that everybody's doing it in their own space. These tech guys are doing things that I would never imagine, could even be an idea. The point is being that social media is changing. So Biden, when he found in South Carolina that he won, he was stunned by Michigan. He was stunned that 100,000 people voted uncommitted. Why? He won Michigan by 154,000 votes. Technically, he still has a 54,000 margin. that he can win Michigan by if we count those 100,000 as abandoning Biden. But Biden didn't read 100,000 as 100,000. He read it as 400, 500,000. Because Muslims, when they mobilize, many of them don't know how the system actually works. So many of them probably never knew there was a primary taking place on that day. And many non-Muslims as well who are apolitical didn't know there was a primary on that day, but who are committed to punishing Biden. So that 100,000 is the minority who know how the system works, is the minority who are already engaged, who went out and mobilized and said they voted uncommitted. Biden's campaign manager, the day after the Michigan uncommitted vote, told Reuters the damage is far greater than we imagine, meaning Biden is unaware of the extent of the damage that he's done in Gaza and the extent of the shift in American public opinion that you brought about. But ya ibadallah, I want to finish on this. That despite the heartbreak you might be feeling, and that's not something that suggests weak iman for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he left Mecca after 13 years, he turns back on his way out and he says, Wallahi, you are the dearest land to me, and if your people had never driven me from you, I would never have left you. He obeyed the decree of Allah, but through heartbreak. There's nothing wrong with feeling the heartbreak as you're mobilizing forward. I always used to think Haqq had to feel good. Let me tell you, Gaza taught me Haqq doesn't feel good. The fact that you have to fight against a genocide, you have to fight against an ethnic cleansing, it does not, it's sickening the fact that we live in a society where that has to happen. But the point that I'm saying is this, Ibadallah, there's a reason why Netanyahu and Biden are trying to find a PR campaign to do humanitarian aid. There's a reason why Netanyahu and Biden are disagreeing over how the Rafah offensive should take place. There's a reason why Biden is concerned and trying to find a masjid in Michigan to receive him. I was in Michigan and I remember they said, if Biden sends his team, what should we do? And of course, I gave you the example of Medina, but there's a more modern example for the youngsters who don't like the Seerah examples. I don't know if anybody here has seen the film Godfather. Have you seen the film Godfather? You know the scene towards the end where Don Corleone tells his son, he says they're fighting with the Barzinis. So Don Corleone says to his son, he says, the Barzinis are going to ask for a reconciliation. The Barzinis are going to ask for a reconciliation. And they're going to set up a neutral place, but in that place, that's where they're going to assassinate you. So they're going to lull you to vote for them, and then they're going to ignore you for 4 years because they say if we kill 30,000, why should we take these people seriously, given they came back and voted for us again, even after 30,000? But then Michael Corleone talks about the traitor in the ranks, the ones who are trying to sell out the cause. So Don Corleone tells him, and the one who brings the message, that's the traitor. So the message that receives that, I didn't say it, you said it. But the point that I'm saying here is, ya ibadallah, is this. There's a reason Biden brought forward the primaries. It's because he's worried there's a change that has taken place. There's a reason why Biden is looking for a masjid. It's because he's worried about the issues that has taken place. The point is, you have made the difference. There's a reason Macron is calling for a ceasefire when Biden doesn't want to. Why did they restore the funding to UNRWA when Biden doesn't want them to? Why is the Belgian deputy PM calling for sanction on Israel when Biden doesn't want them to? Why did South Africa go and take the case to the ICJ? It's because it heard your call, it heard you raising. And the reality here is this, that while you may be looking at this as a tragedy, remember two things, and I finish on these points. Ya Sheikh Abdurrahman, I finish on this point. The first thing is, when you're looking at Gaza, remember, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Do not consider those who have died in the way of Allah as dead. Rather, they are with Allah, already receiving their bounty. And the reason and the proof that they know this is the tents that write on them, هَذَا مِنْ فَضْلِ رَبِّي. They know that either they will survive and they will win, or they will go to Jannah. They know they win either way. But the second point that is worth noting is this, ya ibadallah. Remember, this world is shifting. 5 months ago, if you told me that Israel would be on trial for genocide, I'd have told you you're a madman. Now it's on trial for genocide. If you had told me that Biden, with 15 judges to 2, he would be unable to get the case kicked out, because we all said the international institutions are all under control of America. No, it's proven abundantly clear that it's not. But not only that, ya ibadallah, the fact that now here in America, they're talking about the Muslim vote. Biden is worried about what will happen in November. Biden is now reaching out and saying, please, let me show some empathy. Let me show. It's because he's worried that you have a power that you might manifest. And remember, and this is the final sentence, I promise, even though I'm notorious for it. This is the final sentence. The point here is this. Remember, if ever you're in doubt about your power and you don't want to trust Allah's power and you don't want to trust the seerah and the lessons of the seerah and you don't want to listen to Sami and you don't listen to Sheikh Abdurrahman and you don't listen to anybody who looks like you because of the inferiority complex, then go to Sahih non-Muslim. Go to Sahih Netanyahu, who believes in Allah more than most Muslims because he's spending millions of dollars to silence the Muslim voice because he identifies a threat that can ruin his genocide. Go to Sahih Blinken, because Blinken went to Saudi to try to get the fatwa to get you to be quiet because he recognized the power that you have, that he worries you will manifest. Go to Sahih Biden who is going to finding a masjid in Michigan because he's worried his political future will be ruined by the Muslims. And go to Sahih Heraclius, the non-Muslim Roman emperor, who when he was asked, when he asked Abu Sufyan, who are the people who are making the Prophet ﷺ to this effectiveness, making you worried so much, even though you have the army and the weapons? Abu Sufyan said it's the ordinary people who are mobilizing behind him and giving him everything. He didn't say the billionaires or the armies. He said the ordinary people. Aradhiluna, he said, the lowest of society. They are the ones raising their voices, mobilizing, giving everything for the Prophet ﷺ. Listen to what Sahih non-Muslim Heraclius says. Heraclius says that if it's the case that it's the ordinary people mobilizing, the ordinary people raising their voices, the ordinary people protesting, the ordinary people donating, the ordinary people giving everything for the cause, Heraclius says two things. First, this is the way of the prophets. This is the prophetic way. Even if they feel heartbroken, this is the prophetic way. Even if you feel despair, this is the prophetic way. And listen to what Sahih non-Muslim says. Contrary to what Muslims saying when they say, Semi, we need the money first, we need the armies first. Listen to what Sahih non-Muslim Heraclius says when Abu Sufyan says it's the ordinary people who refuse to be quiet. He says, if that is the case, then Muhammad will come to rule this very land on which I rule. Ibadallah, don't underestimate your power. And remember, if you think you're doing a favor for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as was suggested earlier, beware that, because you know the only people in history that disbelieved their messenger but were guided are the people of Yunus alayhi salam. Because in Yunus, Allah gives an example that, yeah, Yunus, I didn't need you to guide them to the deen. I could have done it myself. I was giving you the honor of whether you wanted to be the vehicle through which I use. Ibadallah, may Allah make us the vehicles. He's already decided the outcome. He's already decided the timing of the outcome. He's already decided how it's going to. The only choice he's given us is whether we will strive to be the vehicles. Let these voices be the vehicles, inshallah. Wa barakallahu fikum.
Takbir. Takbir. Takbir.
Inshallah, we have very limited time because Iftar is approaching. So I just want to do two things. We're going to play a quick video. I want all of your attention towards the screen here behind me. This video, inshallah ta'ala, will highlight how the aid is getting in, how the work is being done on the ground. This organization, Human Development Fund, operates in 13 countries, providing, as of today, food and nutrition for 13 different countries in populated areas, in refugee camps, and even inside of Gaza. So inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to cue in the video because I don't have enough time to go into the details of the projects and what we have done, but the video will suffice in answering the impact of since October 7th, since this genocide has been happening, the impact of the donations of our Muslim community around the entire world. Alhamdulillah, over $2 million has been transferred in support of our brothers and sisters in Palestine, inshallah. And tonight, inshallah, your contribution and your support will help continue the aid in being delivered. So, Brother Muhammad Auda, is the video, are we able to play the video quickly? Okay, it's ready. It's right here on your, it's not, okay, it's behind me too. Okay.
في هذا المسجد شهرا, that for me to go with my brother in his time of need, to go and take care of his need, it is more beloved to me than to perform i'tikaf in his masjid, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.